If you're in the market for a new compact family SUV, there's a pretty good chance you're probably looking at one of these vehicles. Both the Toyota RAV4 and Mazda CX-5 represent the top sellers in each of the respective brands. And while Toyota got a significant head start, they basically started this segment back in 1996 with the RAV4, it has allowed this model to become the best-selling retail vehicle in America, with Toyota selling nearly 480,000 units in the US last year. Now, Mazda was a little late to the party, introducing the CX-5 to the world back in 2012, but that didn't stop Mazda from selling a pretty healthy amount, which at one point they moved nearly 170,000 units. Now for 2026, there are new versions of both vehicles, and this week we've managed to wrangle together two of the top trims. On my left, the brand new 2026 RAV4 Limited, and on my right, the 2026 Mazda CX-5 Premium Plus. And the big question I went answered, if you guys have roughly $40,000 to spend on a new small family SUV, which one of these two vehicles is actually the better buy? Stay tuned to find out. So it's not every day that you get to wrangle together two of the newest compact family SUVs, but as you can see, timing just happened to work out because we have both the brand new RAV4 and CX-5. And before we start talking about the styling differences between these two models, let's first start by talking about what's going on underneath the hood. Now, talking about the powertrain, let me first start with the Mazda CX-5. As you can see, this is a transverse mounted engine, and you guys, if you are familiar with Mazda products, you'll know this engine. It's essentially a carryover motor, the company's Skyactiv G 2.5 liter double overhead cam, 4-cylinder with variable valve timing and direct injection. It has a very high compression ratio, and the horsepower figures are 187 horsepower, 186 pound-feet of torque. It all goes out through a 6-speed automatic transmission. That's their own design. And Mazda's iActive Sense all-wheel drive system is going to be standard. There is no front drive variant for the all-new third-generation CX-5. Fuel economy is rated at 24 in the city and 30 on the highway with its 15.3-gallon fuel tank. You're looking at around 380 miles of range on a full tank of regular. Mazda says this vehicle is capable of towing up to 1,500 pounds, and as this car sits, it weighs in at around 3,800 pounds. 0 to 60 times, we'll talk about that later on during the driving scene, but top speed should be right around 120 miles an hour. Now, in contrast, the Toyota, you guys would expect Mazda to be the faster vehicle because they're all about zoom, zoom, but it seems like the RAV4 will be zooming right by the CX-5, courtesy of its standard hybrid powertrain. That's right, there's no more gas-only variant of the RAV4. All of them come powered with a 2.5-liter dynamic force 4-cylinder with either 2 or 3 electric motors helping it. My particular limited test car comes standard with all-wheel drive, so it has a separate electric motor at the rear, giving it an electronic on-demand all-wheel drive system. So there's no physical connection between the engine and the rear drive shaft, unlike the Mazda. The RAV4 is running right now, but you don't hear anything. The noise you're hearing is from the Mazda behind me. The engine, or the electric motors draw their power from a 1.02 kilowatt-hour battery pack that allows this vehicle to run on pure electric power alone for very low speeds at light throttle applications. The total output here is 236 horsepower. So that's nearly 50 more horsepower versus the Mazda. Toyota doesn't quote a torque figure. It has an eCVT, electronic continuously variable transmission. So not as traditional stepped automatic, and we'll talk about the 0 to 60 time when we get this vehicle out on the road. Top speed should be pretty similar to the Mazda at around 125 miles an hour, and the Toyota does tow more up to 3,500 pounds, 1,750 if you guys go for a front drive version, however. And as this car sits, it weighs only 100 pounds more than the Mazda, despite the extra technology and battery and electric motors at just under or just over 3,900 pounds. Closing the hood, let's go ahead and talk about the exterior styling of both of these vehicles. Now, they both got redesigns this year. The RAV4 is now in its 6th generation, the Mazda CX-5 is now in its 3rd generation, and both are still pretty instantly recognizable as their prospective models. The RAV4 is a fully loaded limited trim. Toyota offers it in 6 different trims, while the Mazda is in a Premium Plus, the fully loaded model. Mazda also offers this vehicle, I believe, in 5 different trim levels, so a little bit less, but still, Toyota does have more variations because you can get this vehicle in a plug-in hybrid with an upgraded powertrain. Mazda says that a hybrid CX-5 is coming sometime next year. But let's go ahead and talk about the exterior styling. Let's start with the Mazda. Now, this vehicle is painted in a color called Machine Gray Metallic. It's an extra $500 if you guys want this color. It's a very sophisticated and premium looking car. In fact, this is Mazda's upgraded Kodo 2 design language, and the new CX-5 got a significant upgrade in terms of dimensions. This vehicle is also around an inch wider than before, and with the signature 5-point grille having just a more widened appearance, especially with the extra trim pieces. You have these new stacked LED headlights, which have an LED daytime running light, LED turn signal, LED projector low and high beams. You can see Mazda's turn signal does this interesting fade in and fade out design, with the lower front fascia having these nicely integrated parking sensors and an integrated front camera system. The Mazda logo there houses the radar sensor for the adaptive cruise. No fog lights on the CX-5, but you do have active grille shutters and lots of gloss black in the front splitter. Overall, I do find the Mazda's front end to be pretty attractive. I've always liked the way the old CX-5 looked, and the new version I think looks even better. Now, in contrast, the Toyota, you can see, has a much more conservative design to it, but at the same time, it still looks modern and sophisticated. This has a lot of Toyota's newest design trends here with their new hammerhead LED headlight design. This limited trim gets an upgraded LED headlight where it includes an LED daytime running light, LED turn signals, and you have LED low and high beams. And I also love how the limited gives you LED fog lights, which you can't get on the Mazda. The grille on the Toyota definitely is less pronounced. It actually almost tries to look like it's like an electric vehicle with just these little diamond or hexagonal openings in the lower portion of the grille. The limited also gives you these kind of satin chrome trim inside those little openings, and you also get a satin gray painted front splitter in addition to some unpainted cladding. So there's definitely a lot less piano black plastic on the RAV4, but let me know in the comment section below which one of these vehicles you think looks better. I think the Toyota would look nicer if it was the sportier trims like the XSE or the GR Sport, but the limited trim is part of the core family. This is a trim that I think most people are gonna end up buying. Now, moving around the side profile, let's talk about the Mazda. This vehicle got a significant growth spur this year with an overall length of 184.6 and a wheelbase of 110.8. It's actually around 4 inches longer than the RAV4, which is kind of surprising considering the CX-5 has always been the smaller vehicle in the class. These are the 19-inch alloy wheels that you get as standard with the Premium Plus trim. I'm kind of over the glossy black finish, and the Mazda's tires are pretty skinny. They're a 225 by 55 R19. You do have all independent suspension and 12.9-inch disc rotors at the front, around 8.2 inches of ground clearance. It also has this little interesting pronounced notch on the wheel arch trim that you'll also find on the rear. The gloss black definitely looks good with this machine gray paint. And you also have a power folding side mirrors, gloss black as well. And Mazda finally is including a panoramic sunroof on the CX-5, which is a feature you couldn't get before. Although I will say the sunroof doesn't open up all the way over just the 2 front seats area. I also don't like how the rear windows don't roll down all the way. I'll show you that the Toyota allows you to do so. Unlike the CX-50, this car's sibling in the showrooms, there is an independent rear suspension on this car. Rear rotors are around 11.8 inches. And then moving over to the rear, you can see the design definitely is handsome. I really appreciate the new look that has a taillight design that's mimicking the front headlight design. It's an all LED taillight design as well. Then Mazda's trying this new design where they're putting just the Mazda script at the back. The turn signal you can see also has that fade in and fade out design. And the rear diffuser looks a little bit more aggressive, and I love the dual outlet chrome exhaust tip, which is a feature that Toyota used to put on the RAV4. But now the CX-5, I believe, is one of the few vehicles that still has a chrome outlet exhaust. Now, in contrast, the Toyota's overall length is 181 inches. So it's roughly 3.5 inches longer. I think I said 4 earlier. Dimensionally, this vehicle didn't change too much compared to the previous generation. Still rides in the Toyota TNGA architecture. It has a much shorter 105.9-inch wheelbase versus the 110.8 on the Mazda. And then with the RAV4, these are the standard 18-inch alloy wheels on the limited trim. They definitely look very undersized, riding on a 235 by 60 R18 Goodyear Assurance all-season tire versus the Toyo Open Countries on the Mazda. The brake rotors are 12 inches at the front, 11 inches at the rear. Toyota also quotes 8.1 inches of ground clearance, which is around the same as the Mazda, a little bit less, but you can get a woodland trim that'll increase the ground clearance to 8.6. The wheel arch trim here is not a glossy black, it's kind of a flat black, which is good for durability, which is nice. The Limited still includes a black painted side mirror, 360 camera as well, just like the Mazda with integrated turn signals, but no power folding mirrors on the Toyota. You can get a two-tone roof on this vehicle, but not on the Limited trim. And then the Limited also comes standard with a panoramic sunroof, which does open up larger. The roof rails, or my test car has an optional crossbar that gives you more functionality to the roof. And then unlike the Mazda, I love how the rear window rolls all the way down, which as you can see on the Mazda, it kind of stops at a certain point. Back away from the RAV, this definitely has a more boxy, taller appearance versus the CX-5, which also Mazda made it a little bit more boxy and taller this year, but in general, they just have that typical shape that you would associate with a compact crossover. I personally would upgrade to the 20-inch alloys that you can get on this trim for an extra $1,200. The rear of the RAV4 has a really interesting vertical LED stacked design, or I guess just a stacked LED vertical light element, which definitely gives it a unique light signature. It also is a full LED turn signal, which is standard on all trims, which is nice. Toyota, instead of spelling out Toyota, they just spell out RAV4 at the back. Extra badging here. HEV stands for hybrid electric vehicle. And then of course there's an all-wheel drive badge to let you know you have all-wheel drive. Toyota used to put a dual chrome outlet exhaust on the previous generation, but sadly they've done away with that. There is still two exhaust tips underneath, but they're just tucked underneath the rear bumper, and there's some extra gray painted plastic on the rear bumper in addition to some unpainted plastic. Now looking at the cargo area, a foot activated power liftgate is going to be included on this model, and Toyota is going to have a little bit more cargo space. The company says you have around 37.8 cubic feet of storage space underneath here, which is a very usable amount. There's a little bit of storage off to the side. There's also underneath here, you're gonna find a temporary spare tire. And then if you wanna fold the seats down, which sadly there are no release levers here, but you can kind of reach in and then push this forward. The Toyota says you expand the cargo to around 70.8 cubic feet of storage space, which is definitely nice. It's around a cubic foot more versus the prior generation and around 4 cubic feet more versus the Mazda. So it's kind of interesting how the Toyota is the smaller vehicle overall, but it does have better packaging and more cargo space. Now in contrast, let's show you guys the cargo capacity of the CX-5, which this vehicle also comes with a foot activated power liftgate, standard on this particular trim. And Mazda definitely made this cargo area bigger for this generation, but at around 33 cubic feet of storage space, it still trails the Toyotas by around 4 cubic feet, but it also has like 3 cubic feet more than the prior generation. You have some additional storage off to the left and the right, which the Toyota didn't give you. There's also a temporary spare as well with some decent underfloor storage. And unlike the Toyota, there are some release levers here that allow you to fold the seats down easily with that pull of that lever, which expands the cargo to 66 cubic feet of space. That's an increase of 7 cubic feet versus the prior generation, but remember, the Toyota is 3.5 inches longer, yet it offers 4 more cubic feet. So it all has to do with the packaging, which I think Toyota just did a better job versus what Mazda did. Now moving on to the interior, let's go ahead and start with the new Mazda CX-5 first. Now that machine gray exterior is complemented by a black leather interior. This is the leather interior that you get with the Premium Plus trim levels. Mazda also offers a sport tan interior. Those are your two leather interior colors. But if you guys want real leather, you have to go with the Mazda because the Toyota has a synthetic leather that they call Softex. You can see the seats have a nice contrast white stitching. The seats are also perforated, which means you have heated and ventilated seats, 10-way power adjustable driver's seat with 2-person memory. The passenger seat is a 6-way power adjustment. But at least Mazda gives you the heated and cooled seats if you guys go for the premium trims and up. Now the door panel materials, this is where Mazda typically does well here, except for this new generation because they've downgraded the materials. This is a hard touch plastic, which is unfortunate, but you do have leather here with contrast stitch. It's nice and squishy right here, however, where you'd rest your elbows. Chrome accented door handle. Window controls, they have a high quality tactile feel. They're one touch for all 4. The Mazda gives you power folding mirrors where the Toyota doesn't. However, I don't love how cheap feeling and slippery this feels for the grab handle. So that's something where I think they should have put a grippier or leather material there. Down here, it's hard touch plastic. And then Mazda gives you a 12-speaker Bose stereo, which I think does sound better versus the stereo system in the Toyota. Now stepping inside with 8.2 inches of ground clearance, it has a pretty easy step in height. As I shut the door, the door has a nice solid sounding thunk, which adds to that impression of quality. Now, here's the key fob for the vehicle. You can see Mazda's key is bigger versus the Toyota's. It has buttons off to the side with your typical lock, unlock, power liftgate, and panic. No remote start from the fob itself, however. And if you want to start the vehicle up, the start-stop button is here where you'd expect it to be. And because the Mazda is not a hybrid or a mild hybrid, it has a traditional starter noise. I also really like the chime that it plays, it just feels very soothing. Now, this particular model, being the Premium Plus, also has the bigger infotainment screen. It's a 15.6-inch center display with Google built in. It's built off of Android Automotive. It has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It looks a lot more modern. It's one of the biggest screens you're going to find in the segment, and it complements nicely with the 12.3-inch digital gauge display. Now, the steering wheel also looks new. It has Mazda's latest driver assistance tech with a camera that watches your face. Instead of the Mazda logo, it has the Mazda script, just like on the back of the vehicle. The wheel itself has a manual tilt telescoping arrangement, so you can get a comfortable driving position. The horn, it sounds nondescript, but appropriately toned given the size of this vehicle. You get also features like rain sensing windshield wipers, paddle shifters. You can't get that on the RAV, at least not on the limited trim. And then this trim also comes with a head-up display, which is standard. The upper part of the dash here, sadly, is hard touch plastic, but over on this side, it is a squishier soft touch material, which this is really what should have been on the upper door panels, but sadly it's not. You also have more leather here, traditional air vents with some actual buttons here for your defrost and rear defrost and your hazard switch. But really, aside from these three buttons and this auto hold button and that switch for the parking brake, there are no buttons on this vehicle other than the buttons on the steering wheel as well. There are a lot of redundant controls on the steering wheel for your audio, and you can also change the way that gauge display looks. There's 3 different views, but you cannot put the GPS in the gauge display. That's something that Toyota lets you do. And then your drive mode selector is now here. There's 3 different modes: off-road, normal, and then a sport mode. Sport makes the gauge cluster turn red, just to let you know you're driving in its more aggressive, sportier drive mode. But it would be nice if Mazda offered a little bit more customization. If I push this button, that brings up the 360 camera. Mazda's quality and resolution has really been stepped up, especially on this new generation. I love how you can do a 360 perimeter scan. It is a great feature that only comes, I believe, on the Premium Plus trim level. Now, there's the software interface with the new 15.6-inch display. This home screen is customizable. Basically, you can just tap that and you can add your GPS over here. You can also add a calendar in there if you'd like. So that's nice how Mazda gives you the option to kind of customize the home screen. I also like how the car here looks very sophisticated. And if I, for example, open the door, that actually opens up, which is cool. If I turn on the turn signal, that turns on. Hit the brakes, that turns on. So it's great how it's linked to what the actual car is doing. That gives you a sense of, you know, a much more modern interface. If I tap that, that brings up all your apps. You can see there's lots of different apps that you can also download from the Google Play Store. That's something Toyota does not offer because it doesn't have Google built in. It has Waze and YouTube built in. And if you guys don't like the fact that there are no hard controls, for example, like if you want to get to your climate, you have to go into the screen. You can also tell Google to do it. So I can say something like, okay, Google, turn on my driver's ventilated seat.
Okay, turning on seat fan for the driver.
So that's definitely a nice touch, but let me try another command. Hey, Google, increase driver temperature to 72. Okay, so the voice commands actually do a pretty good job, which is good because sometimes you don't necessarily want to have to stare at a screen and then watch where your finger is going, which can be distracting when you're trying to drive. There is Google Maps built in, but for some reason my test car isn't pulling up the maps. I don't know why, but that's the dedicated home screen. The music screen is right here as well. And in general, when your phone is connected, it takes up the entire screen. It looks fantastic. So this screen is definitely a nice upgrade versus the old CX-5, and I think a lot of people are going to find a lot to like with that. Down here in the console, additional storage. The cup holders, I have to say, aren't well positioned because if you have a tall drink, this will get blocked by this area here. Traditional gear lever, which is interesting to see a traditional gear lever to go with all the, you know, newness of this interior and the modernness. There's the backup camera, again, with trajectory and distance markers, cross traffic alert, automatic emergency braking, all that stuff you'd expect, of course. I like how Mazda also didn't put any piano black here, which is great. Your wireless phone charging pad is here, although the position of it isn't great. You only have one wireless phone charging pad. My phone, I noticed, would overheat when it was in this, especially when the sun is baking it. You have a nice padded center console. Open that up, and you can see there's 2 USB-Cs. It's relatively useful, but not as big as the RAVs. The seats are comfortable and supportive, but they might be a little too firm. I would have preferred the padding to be softer, but they definitely feel like they hold you in place a little bit nicer. The glove box goes into the dash. It's damped but not lined with felt. Offers lots of additional storage, which is good because there's not much in terms of small storage space in this vehicle. So that's something to keep in mind. The rear view mirror is an auto dimming, frameless design, no digital camera mirror. And then the sunroof, you guys saw it was open earlier. This is the max that it opens. Basically only halfway over the front seats. I really was hoping it would have opened up more, but at least it's nice how a pano roof is finally offered on this generation CX-5. So in general, the Mazda's interior looks more modern, but it's lacking a lot of physical controls that I'm hoping they'll eventually add back, or you can just get used to it. But it has superior voice command controls versus the Toyota. Visibility seems good, build quality seems good. It just doesn't have that same luxury feel that the previous generation had. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back seat of the CX-5. This model definitely has a huge upgrade and a bigger back seat versus the Toyota. First of all, the rear door opens up in a massive opening, which allows you to fit a child seat in here pretty easily. This back seat also gives you the ability to recline ever so slightly, or you can fold it down to create almost flat load floor, which is nice. And Mazda says you have just under 40 inches of legroom in this vehicle. 40 inches is huge. This is my driving position, lots of room to stretch out. There is a hump here for the center passenger to contend with. Rear seat air vents, 3 level heated seats and 2 USB-C charging ports. You have 2 storage pockets there. Adjustable headrest, and you also have an armrest that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders. The Mazda also has a surprisingly good amount of headroom space. I have a solid maybe 4 inches of additional clearance, despite the fact that it has a pano roof. Material quality, sadly still hard touch plastic, and this also feels a little chitsy, but there's leather and leather squishiness right here where you'd rest your elbow. Same cheaper feeling door handle material there. But overall, this is definitely the winner in terms of backseat space, which is surprising because the CX-5 was always the smaller vehicle. But let's go ahead and move over into the RAV4 and talk about the interior for this vehicle. First of all, let me show you the back seat first. The back seat on the RAV has a door that doesn't open quite as large as you can see, but there's 37.8 inches of legroom back here. There's also the rear seats that do recline. Love this harvest beige interior. And as I get back here, you can see this is my driving position. There's noticeably less space. There is still a hump over here. You get 1 level heated seats and rear seat air vents and 2 USB-C charging ports, storage pockets, and then you also have an armrest that folds down with 2 cup holders. Headroom space also feels about the same as the Mazda, which is surprising because this car seems like it's a taller vehicle. But in general, I can cross my legs. It just feels more cramped in this interior. It's still very usable, but that's where it's shocking because the Mazda definitely has more backseat space, which you don't typically expect from a Mazda. But getting into the front seat area, let's go ahead and talk about the interior. First of all, the storm cloud exterior complemented by this harvest beige soft tech. So this is a synthetic leather material with a nice synthetic suede. The Toyota's seats, I will say, are more plush. The padding feels softer, and for a fake leather, it does do a convincing job of acting like real leather. Potentially this could be more durable. It's more, I guess, animal friendly if you guys prefer that, but you can't get real leather in the Toyota. These seats also 10-way power adjustable, 8-way power adjustable for the passenger, heated and ventilated seats as well. You get 2-person memory, but the memory is an actual button. The Mazda, you have to go into the screen to access the memory seats. And with the Toyota's 8.1 inches of ground clearance, it has the same easy step-in height as the Mazda. Now shutting the door, I will say the Mazda has a more solid sounding thunk. The Toyota sounds a little more tinny. It's built on their on the TNGA architecture. Here's the key fob for the car. The Toyota's key is a little bit smaller. It has badging on the back for RAV4, the model, and the Toyota logo. It has the typical buttons here, and there's also a remote start on the fob. If you tap the lock button and hold it on the 3rd try, that should activate the remote start. That's something the Mazda doesn't have. Start-stop button is right here, and because this vehicle is a hybrid, it doesn't have a traditional starter noise. Instead, it just says ready and EV in the instrument panel. And the Toyota screen, even though it is smaller by 2 inches, still looks very modern and sophisticated. This is the bigger 12.6-inch touchscreen. You can hear the engine did turn on there to turn on the air conditioning and to recharge the battery pack. And in terms of the door panel materials, surprisingly, the Toyota has the soft touch injection molded plastic up here, nice and padded here, although it's not as squishy as the Mazda's. Instead of a chrome door handle, this is a gray painted plastic. Window controls are one touch for all 4. They also have a high quality feel. No power folding mirrors in the Toyota, and sadly, this does have a cheap material here where I use this to grab and close the door. It's also hard touch plastic here. The steering wheel offers a manual tilt telescoping arrangement, still has a heated wheel just like the Mazda. No paddles, however. The horn sounds a little puny. The Mazda has a better sounding horn. My test car for $600 has the head-up display, but all of them come with the digital 12.3-inch cluster. The base screen is 10.5 inches, while this is the 12.9-inch display. So this is definitely a big upgrade versus the older RAV4, but it's still around 2 inches smaller than the Mazda's screen, or 2.5 inches smaller. It has a traditional volume knob and some buttons here for adjusting the temperature control up and down. But a lot of the other climate functions have moved into the screen there. For example, ditto with the heated and cooled seat functionality, which is now in the screen. Don't love that. Would have preferred this to be a traditional a hard button like the previous generation. You have dual wireless phone charging pads, and in the Toyota, I found them to work more reliably. They kept your phone cool, and the limited trim is the only trim to give you the dual wireless phone charging pads. Your drive mode selector is here. Switch this between eco, normal, sport, and custom, and then there's also a trail and a snow driving mode and a normal button right there, although this could have been actual climate buttons. As opposed to having so many buttons for a drive mode selector, so I don't know why Toyota did that. You have two USB-C charging ports here, another storage shelf here. If I push that button, it brings up your 360 camera, which just like the Mazda gives you a 360 perimeter scan. You can change the color of the actual car in the picture, which is kind of nice. This is such a huge upgrade for Toyota in terms of the infotainment tech as well. And the Toyota also offers an automatic parallel parking feature, which is an optional upgrade on certain trims, standard on this limited grade. You also have features like downhill assist control. This stubby little toggle is for the eCVT. Push this forward, that brings up your backup camera. If you guys don't have the advanced park, you'll get a traditional gear lever. If you prefer that, you can just skip the advanced park option, although the limited comes standard with it. Better positioning for the cup holders on the Toyota, where you can easily put one of those bigger jugs, and you can take this out to create a big open space if you'd like. This area here doesn't have any piano black plastic aside from this area, but it's nice how Toyota, went with this more durable material. But I will say that lots of cheap materials here. This is slightly padded, and this also opens up in both ways, which is nice. And unfortunately, because of the design of the center console, where you can basically push both buttons, you can flip this around or take it off and create a table here. That's the reason why it's a little wobbly. This is standard. You can't actually get this with a traditional console. So this is nice for practicality, not so nice for a luxurious feel. The 9-speaker JBL sound system is standard on this trim. It sounds good, a little bass heavy, not as crystal clear as the Mazda Bose system. I like the storage shelf here. Glove compartment is damped but not lined with felt. It's a bin style, not as big as the Mazdas. The seats, however, I think are just so much more comfortable, even though they don't hold you in place quite as aggressively, and you get features like an auto dimming rearview mirror with a digital camera mirror. And then the sunroof in this vehicle also opens up larger to where you can basically open it up, and then you can push it again and open it up completely over the two front seats. So that's definitely a nice perk. But in general, the Toyota's interior, while it doesn't look luxurious, it has slightly better materials than the Mazda. Build quality is also pretty tight, and despite the fact that it has a smaller screen, I actually find the software in this to also still be very good. So kind of keep that in mind if you guys are considering the interior of the Toyota versus the Mazda. So I know trying to decide between the new Toyota RAV4 and Mazda CX-5 could represent a big challenge for a lot of people. I mean, both vehicles are brand new for 2026. They have their latest and greatest in terms of technology, new styling, much more refinement. But as we go into the driving scene here, let's start in the RAV4. This is the benchmark vehicle, and technically this came out a little bit before the Mazda. We'll hop into the Mazda afterwards, and we'll talk about how it compares to the RAV. What you'll notice right away about the RAV is the fact that this is a hybrid. It basically is the quieter option because it doesn't have an engine that comes on all the time. It can drive itself on pure electric power alone. And with 236 horsepower, this has nearly 50 more horsepower than the Mazda, which is kind of embarrassing for the Mazda because Mazda is all about driving matters and zoom zoom. Yet there is no hybrid version or turbo version of the Mazda just yet. Now, that sound is not pleasant. Obviously, Toyota has done great, a great job here at just adding more sound deadening and making the engine a little bit quieter. But if you're an enthusiast and you prefer stepped automatic, this is where the Mazda is going to give you, that traditional feel. But at the same time, you have significantly less power. Now, let's go ahead and try out a quick 0 to 60 time in this car and see what it's able to achieve. Now, I'll put the drive mode here into its sports setting. And then we'll go ahead and we'll brake torque it. Oof, it feels really good off the line thanks to that electric power. Again, not a great sound if you're an enthusiast, but 6.9 seconds there. 6.9 is pretty much among the quickest in the segment. You're gonna need a CX-50 turbo or a Tiguan turbo to get faster than this. And then remember, if this is not fast enough, Toyota offers a plug-in hybrid version with 320 horsepower. That's gonna be a low 5-second car in terms of 0 to 60. So the RAV has the power, you know, up there. It's one of the quickest and most powerful vehicles in the segment. It also is a really easy car to drive. The visibility is good. I can see out of the front and the side nicely. This A-pillar is actually pretty thin for such a, you know, new vehicle, which has lots of safety equipment stuffed into the A-pillar. The view out of the back is also good with that upright windshield, and unlike the Mazda, Toyota offers a digital camera rearview mirror, which is fantastic. I will say the steering in the Toyota is numb, dead, light, devoid of feel, and the suspension is so softly sprung in this car, but it has a really good ride quality, and I think that's what buyers in this segment really care about. This car also is relatively quiet. There is not very much road noise. Mostly what you hear is the engine noise, and my test car has the accessory roof rail crossbars that are creating a little more wind noise than usual. If you take those off, it should become a little quieter. I will say that some competitors are going to be a little bit quieter than the new RAV. It's quieter than the previous generation, but this is still pretty mid-pack. We'll talk about the Mazda's quietness when we hop into that vehicle. But the seats in the RAV4, I think they are more comfortable for my body type. So make sure you always try the seats out for yourselves. This is a Softex leatherette material as opposed to the real leather in the Mazda, but I think the padding feels nicer. It's not quite as aggressively bolstered, but for longer drives, I found this seat to be a little bit more comfortable. For my liking. There wasn't a single squeak and rattle in this interior. And then the infotainment system, you can see there's the CarPlay connected. It's a slightly smaller screen, 2 inches smaller than the Mazda, but at the same time, it doesn't look that much smaller. And I also like how it's better integrated with an actual volume knob. It has climate control buttons. It has more buttons versus the Mazda, so I think Toyota did a better job here with ergonomics. It's almost like Mazda didn't get the hint from other manufacturers who made the mistake of getting rid of all their buttons. And then Mazda just didn't listen to that. The driver assistance tech in this car is also standard. In the Mazda, you do have to pay extra for their absolute best driver assistance tech, although you have adaptive cruise and automatic braking and lane keep as standard on both cars. But in general, this car just feels really well-rounded. It feels really easy to live with. It's not the sportiest, obviously, but it is the most fuel efficient. We got 41 miles to the gallon without even trying, and this car easily did over 500 miles of range on a full tank. 500 miles of range. Again, road trip king, best-in-class range, best-in-class fuel efficiency, and this is why the hybrid version of the CX-5 cannot come soon enough. It really should have launched with it, but Mazda has that vehicle coming next year. But overall, this limited trim RAV4 represents such a well-rounded car that's going to work for like 99% of people in this segment. But let's go ahead and hop into the Mazda and see how it compares to the new RAV4 out on the road. So the Toyota RAV4 sets a pretty high benchmark. I mean, it comes standard with a hybrid powertrain, and now we've swapped into the Mazda CX-5, which isn't even available as a hybrid for now. Mazda promises it's coming sometime next year, but we just have a base engine here. It's a 2.5 liter gasoline direct injection Skyactiv G 4-cylinder that makes 187 horsepower. That's nearly 50 less horsepower than the RAV4. Now the Mazda is a little bit lighter, around 3,800 pounds, but it's only 100 pounds lighter. It's hooked up to a 6-speed auto. It has paddle shifters, so this definitely gives you the more traditional driving feel. And if you like the traditional feel, you're gonna like this car. The engine actually doesn't sound terrible compared to the droniness that you hear with the RAV4. So again, if you want that traditional feel, the Mazda is gonna give that to you. So I applaud Mazda for offering this, because Toyota, again, discontinued the gas-only engine for the new 6th generation RAV4. Now, the Mazda definitely feels like the sportier vehicle. The steering in this car is more responsive, it's quicker ratio. The suspension in this car also seems to feel tighter. It doesn't have such a softness that you get from the Toyota, but I do notice that the ride quality in the Mazda is noticeably firmer. If you guys are looking for a more comfortable ride, you're gonna want the Toyota, and that's kind of a normal thing. Mazda usually has a stiffer ride quality. The 6-speed auto in this car is a little slow to shift, and it's so widely spaced that it pops the engine out of the meat of its power band so quickly every time you do that. And that's where a naturally aspirated engine can feel gutless. You don't feel that gutless feeling in the RAV4 hybrid thanks to the electric motors that provide instantaneous thrust, versus this car, you have to wait for the engine revs to build up. But hey, that's the more traditional feel. Now, let's try the 0 to 60 on the same stretch where we tested the RAV and see how the Mazda compares. We'll brake torque it. 8.51 seconds there. So 8.51 is about a second and a half slower than what we got in the RAV4, which did it in 6.9 seconds. So keep that in mind. If you pull up next to a RAV in your CX-5, you're gonna be embarrassed. It's gonna blow the doors off of you at that stoplight. But hey, if you don't like the droniness of a 4-cylinder eCVT, this is definitely gonna have that more traditional feel. Just know that it is significantly slower and one of the slowest accelerating vehicles in the segment. It's a pity that Mazda doesn't offer the turbo anymore, because that would have likely shaved 2 seconds off the 0 to 60 time. Now, compared to the RAV, the visibility in this car doesn't feel quite as good, I'd say. The pillar here is a little bit bigger. The rear window is squished a little bit. Let me switch the drive mode out of its sports setting so it stops revving the engine up so high, because it's a little noisy. Just like in the Toyota, it can be a little noisy. This is also a little bit drony as well. I wish Mazda would offer a digital camera rearview mirror, because that rear window isn't quite as big as the Toyota's. It's not quite as upright, but it's still pretty easy to see out of and drive. The hood in this car is a little easier to see past because it doesn't have those lines and bulges like the RAV4 has. So that to me feels nice. This car in general just feels more sporty. It feels more playful. And I think that's where, you know, Mazda's driving matters philosophy comes into play. It just, driving matters doesn't necessarily mean acceleration matters, because this car is still a little slow. In terms of the technology, the bigger screen in the Mazda looks good. I like how the icons are a little bit bigger. This feels a little more modern because it doesn't have any buttons, but at the same time, I really like the volume knob in the RAV. It had actual buttons for the climate control. Everything in the Mazda is into the screen, but you can get away from that by just using the touch controls. The driver display here also is fully digital, but you can't put the GPS. You can't even find the odometer in the frickin' instrument panel display. This car also has a heads-up display. I didn't hear any single squeaks and rattles in this car. It feels really well made, but the seats in this car feel harder. So I much prefer the seats in the Toyota, although these feel a little bit more aggressively bolstered. I really would need to compare it apples to apples to the XSE's RAV4 seats, because those are a little bit sportier than the limited seats. But in general, this car is still easy to drive and easy to live with. It just feels a little bit more lethargic. It feels a little more traditional, but at the same time, it has a bigger screen. But the RAV screen isn't small by any means, so I don't think that this is a deal breaker for me. In fact, Mazda's base screen is the size of the RAV4's upgraded screen, basically. And this is the only trim that gets the bigger screen. So in general, you know, the two cars, they have, you know, you can tell they compete in the same segment. The Mazda feels a little sportier in the handling department, but it rides a little stiffer. This car has less road noise, but it has more engine noise when you're really pushing the engine, and you're going to be pushing it often because it doesn't have any torque, unlike the Toyota, which has way more torque. It has instantaneous electric motor torque. And in terms of fuel efficiency, I was getting only 24 miles to the gallon in this car, so roughly 15 miles per gallon less than the RAV4 with 350 miles of range. So 15 miles per gallon less, and you'll get 150 more miles of range in the RAV4. So obviously, if you plan on doing a lot more road trips, you drive in the city more, the RAV is the king there, but you know, this is also a lot less expensive. So in terms of the drive, it could go either way. It just depends on what is more important to you when driving your compact SUV. So after spending a full week with the brand new Toyota RAV4 and Mazda CX-5, you would be nuts to not have one of these vehicles make it to your short list, because as you guys know, the compact family SUV space is a fiercely competitive marketplace. It's one of the top selling vehicle segments you're going to find in North America, and the RAV4 is the best selling vehicle, with Toyota selling nearly 500,000 units in the US last year. I know Mazda is a much smaller car company, but the company consistently does over 150,000 units. They did around 136,000, however, last year, which kind of shows that they're ramping up production. But a lot of their sales have also been going to the CX-50. So it's interesting how Mazda offers two vehicles in the space. But after spending a full week driving the two vehicles, you're probably wondering, what is my winner? We're going to get to that, but let's first kind of recap on what happened. The RAV4 obviously is the quicker vehicle, hitting 60 miles an hour in just 6.8 seconds compared to the Mazda, which took 8.5 seconds. I know for some of you, 0 to 60 times aren't really that important, but in the real world, the Toyota is going to deliver significantly faster and more effortless acceleration on those longer road trips. It also had an engine that, despite it being powered by a CVT, an e-CVT, was actually quieter under load compared to the Mazda. The Mazda's engine just sounds pissed off all the time. It makes a lot of noise, which sometimes it sounds good, sometimes it sounds stressed. But all that noise doesn't really translate into forward momentum. The ride quality in the RAV is definitely the smoother and quieter vehicle. The Mazda was a little bit louder, a little bit firmer in terms of its ride, but also this vehicle was more sporty. And if you guys prefer handling dynamics, the Mazda still has that edge, and that's kind of what the company is known for. They're known for driving matters, not necessarily acceleration matters. That's what the Toyota goes to. However, if you guys want a sportier version of the RAV, this is where the XSE or the new GR Sport would come into play. I'm hoping I can get a hold on one of those vehicles sometime later this year. The RAV4's interior also, to me, was a little bit more comfortable in terms of the seat comfort. The Mazda, however, had the bigger back seat, and then the interior quality. This is where Mazda typically has a runaway win, but for some reason, for this generation, they decided to downgrade the interior materials, especially on the upper door panels. So the Toyota technically has, I would say, the slightly better interior quality because it also has better seats. Both of them had pretty excellent build quality. But if you need the bigger back seat, the CX-5 shockingly has that bigger back seat because, again, this vehicle's wheelbase is around 4 inches longer versus on the RAV. Cargo space, however, is going to go to the RAV4 because it has more cargo space versus the Mazda, 4 cubic feet. And then in terms of technology, the Mazda system looks way more modern with its lack of buttons. It has Google built in, excellent voice commands, excellent quality graphics and resolution, huge icons. If you guys are looking for the biggest screen, you're going to like that vehicle, but just keep in mind, you're going to have to get used to the fact that it lacks hard buttons and knobs, and that's something that could be a deal breaker for some, whereas the Toyota, the company did manage to keep some consistent knobs and buttons. However, they did move some of the climate control functions into the screen, and this screen is roughly 2 inches smaller versus the screen in the Mazda. Most of the times, I don't think you're going to notice that. But hey, if you guys want bigger, the Mazda has that slightly bigger screen. In terms of pricing, this is where the Toyota also has a bigger price tag because this vehicle starts at $31,900 for the base LE trim with two-wheel drive. Add $1,500 if you guys want all-wheel drive. The Mazda starts at $29,900 with all-wheel drive, so it's a significant $2,000 cheaper versus the RAV4. Now, of course, the Toyota gets more expensive as you go up the trim ladder. This limited trim with all the bells and whistles starts at $43,300, plus the head-up display, the destination charge, and a couple of accessories my test car has. You're looking at an as-tested price of $46,883. Compare that to the Mazda, which this Premium Plus trim is fully loaded. There are really no options other than the color to add. It starts at just under $39,000, and with destination and the upcharge for the color, my test car over here is just over $41,000, around $41,080. So there's a whopping $5,000 price discrepancy between these two vehicles, and that's a significant chunk of change. But remember, the Toyota is a hybrid. It gets 15 to 20 miles per gallon better. It gets an extra 100 plus miles of additional range, and it has an extra 50 horsepower, so it's quicker. And in that theory, or in that conclusion there, the Toyota could be worth that extra $5,000 price jump because you could make that money back in the real world in gas savings. But for me personally, I would choose the RAV4, but I wouldn't go with this limited trim. I'd probably look at an XSE trim because I think even though the Toyota is more expensive, it is worth the extra charge versus what Mazda's charging. However, I'll be happy to reconsider this comparison test whenever the hybrid version of this car finally shows up sometime next year. But all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full detailed comparison between both the 2026 Toyota RAV4 and the 2026 Mazda CX-5. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.